My name is Charles Sloan Stribling. I was born on July the 18th, 1924, in Habersham, Georgia. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
We welcome today Charles Sloan Stribling to Point of Rock Studios in 90 over 90. Charles was born on July 18, 1924 in the small southern mill village of Habersham, Georgia. Habersham was a quintessential southern mill town where no one locked their doors and everyone knew everyone else. Charles graduated from, a proud graduate of Duke University and a very proud retired lieutenant from the United States Marine Corps. He's retired from a long and productive career in the textile and manufacturing business. Charles has two children, Charles Jr. and the late Catherine Stribling, and is married to Brenda Stribling. Charles, welcome to 90 over 90. Thank you for coming.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Rob.
Well, it's our pleasure. I mentioned in the introduction your being born in Habersham, and I think we'll just start there because that's where your life began, and I think it makes for some interesting history to talk a little bit about the town. Tell us, you lived there with your mother and your dad and your two brothers?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the town and what you remember about it.
Well, Habersham was a carded cotton textile mill with 24,000 spindles. My father was president. My mother was a housewife and ran the house, and she ran a good house too. And
what do you mean by that?
Pardon?
What do you mean she ran a good house?
Well, she had kept the house well. It was a beautiful old home, and it was a pleasure to sit under my mother's table.
Oh, it was? So she was a good cook as well?
Excellent, excellent. She was an instinctive cook. She never looked at anything. She just made it.
Now, tell me about this. How many people, more or less, lived in Habersham? I'm sure it's a smaller town.
It was a mill village with the mill houses and so forth, and in several little locations. About 300 of us.
Oh, really? So you did it really, everybody knew everybody then?
Of course.
And
one big family.
I know that I guess the life of the town centered around the mill. Everybody pretty much worked there.
People worked in the mill, walked to work in most cases, bought their food stuff, so forth at the mill store, and of course they'd charge it, and it was taken out of their pay, and sometimes they would overextend themselves, but
what do you do for entertainment?
Well, the biggest source of entertainment was a mill baseball team, and of course we were on a river, and as a lot of textile mills were, because it utilized water power, and we did a lot of fishing, and we did a lot of hunting, and before the days of television, so the biggest source of entertainment was a baseball team.
Oh, and you, I guess they were part of a textile league or something like that?
There was a league called the Northeast Georgia Textile League. There were about 8 teams in it, and we were right up there with the best of them. We won the championship several times.
Now, you mentioned your dad was a superintendent of the mill, and I guess that was kind of an exalted position. Did he? Who ran the town? I mean, how did that work? Did you have a mayor, or was he kind of the
He was the mayor. He was the chief of police. He was a fire chief, not by title, but it just
by de facto.
That's right. He everybody called him Mr. Earl, and any problem came up, he went to Mr. Earl so he'd get solved. But in essence, it was a little bit of a feudal system, but it was then. It's not anymore. But
what was your relationship like with your dad? What kind of figure was he in your life?
Well, my father was pretty straightforward. He was generally all business, but he had a tennis spot, and we were raised on strict, very very strict, but with a lot of love.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a generous person. He didn't want his generosity to be known, but no one in the mill village went hungry. If they had a problem, they would get help. He wouldn't do it himself. Someone else would do it, but they'd know where it came from.
Mm-hmm. That lesson, I guess, filtered down to you as well, didn't it?
It did. It did indeed.
And your brothers. Were you close with your brothers? Did y'all have the run of the place?
Well, my older brother was 5 years older than me. The next brother was 2 years older than I am. We partied together in a lot of things. We did a lot. We were very close. Our older brother was a little bit off from us and kind of put up with us at times.
Yeah.
And,
As older brothers do with younger brothers.
He was kind of bossy,
Yeah.
And but he was a good person. Not he was a good person, but that's kind of the way it was.
Right. Well, I think that's typical. You mentioned, and when we were talking earlier a few minutes ago, actually about some of what it was like living in a town like that, where you had limited communication with the outside world. And I think your house had a phone in it.
We had a phone.
And it really was the phone that everybody in the village used, so that they had carte blanche to come in your house anytime they wanted. And
anybody wanted to use the phone could always come there in the middle of the night if someone needs a doctor. It's just a known fact. You could come up to our house, come in the front door, come in the hall. There was a phone on the wall, and you could call the doctor whatever you needed. But we never locked the doors. Never even thought about it.
Did you have what was the nearest town to Habersham, or of any consequence?
Well, Habersham County had a town of Cornelia, which is on the Southern Railway, and we had the county seat was a town called Clarksville. It was about 5 miles away, and people didn't call it Clarksville; they referred to it as town. I'm going to town.
Uh-huh.
And
how did they get there?
Well, there was.
Did people mostly drive Ford, I guess?
Well, most of them had cars.
No, did they?
They'd drive, but it was not too far to walk.
Oh, it wasn't. Okay. Back in those days, a couple of miles was nothing.
Nothing. You just walked it.
Now you went to. I know you went off to Macaulay School in Chattanooga for a year, and I think. Tell me what happened. You had your dad passed away that year when you were in school.
Well, I finished high school in Clarksville, Georgia, which was a county school. Got a high school diploma after 11th grade, not 12, but after 11. My father said I was not ready for college. I told him I was. I had a high school diploma. So he said, I'm going to send you to Macaulay School for a year.
You were not in favor of that, I guess.
I was not in favor, but boy, was he right.
And dads usually are.
Yeah. And while I was there, he passed away, which was a traumatic experience because my daddy was just an institution that I
thought he'd be there forever.
Ending never entered my mind.
Yeah.
And it was a total shock for a 17-year-old boy. Matter of fact, first time I went home after going to school once my father died, and it was tough.
I bet it was. Well, I'm sure your mom was a big source of comfort for you and your.
My mother was very strong.
Your family and the whole village, I'm sure, was under duress.
Well, they didn't know what to do. My father died, so they just stopped it. Of course, he would not want to do that. But anyway, and it of course resumed the next day, but. Let's turn the school out and just kind of didn't know what to do. He wasn't there to tell them what to do.
Yeah, well, I think there's that's not unusual in an environment you've described, right, where you have someone who's kind of been the leader of the community for so long.
That was true in those days, but it's not true anymore anywhere.
No, well, I think, as you said earlier, that system is really, for the most part, extinct. Now, you went initially to Clemson, but I believe the war kind of interrupted your stay there.
While I was at Clemson, all the services came and signed people up for the reserve. I signed up with the Marine Corps and was called to active duty after my first year at Clemson.
And as I mentioned in the intro, I know you probably went to Parris Island, did you not?
I went to boot camp in Parris Island, and that is an experience.
What did you like about being a Marine? Why did you join the Marines as opposed to the other branches?
I just liked the presentation they made, and my brother had tried to get in the Marine Corps, my older brother, but he was colorblind and it wouldn't take him, so I tried it and I made it, and I went to boot camp at Parris Island, and that will change anybody.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, it's a shock. First off, it's just a real shock, and after after 2 or 3 weeks, you have a desire to make it, and then you really get into it. And after you make it, you're so proud you did.
Right.
And at that point, you join an elite group of people, a Marine.
Absolutely.
And
did you know that was going to take you to the distant places? I guess you knew you were headed out. You're probably anxious to, I suppose.
We all were. We were kind of foolish. Yeah, we were anxious to go.
Yeah, you thought it was going to happen.
But yes, I did. I went overseas, and I got over there a little bit too late for combat, which I didn't like then, but I'm real proud of it right now.
I mentioned in the that you were a retired lieutenant. You were shipped out, and I believe you eventually ended up in Nagasaki, Japan. How long after the atom bomb was dropped were you there?
Oh, just a couple of months.
Did anybody? Were you prepared for that? What you saw and what you experienced?
Well, I think I was prepared for it because I had read about how I'd seen some pictures, but
what did you see when you got there?
First thing I remember seeing when I got there, of course, we landed a landing craft, was a Japanese woman with a whole basket of little fish on a dock, and then we rode trucks to our billet. And it was probably, I'd been there a week before I went to what we used to call the atomic area. It was kind of away from the downtown area of Nagasaki, but Nagasaki had shipbuilding and aircraft manufacture, and it had been hit pretty hard with conventional bombing.
Mm-hmm.
And
what did it look like when you got to the bomb area?
Well, it was just leveled. And
I believe you took some pictures, and
I took some pictures, and I had some pictures taken just the day afterwards. And but the funny thing about it, the Japanese started building back just as soon as it was over.
They did.
They started building back.
Did you encounter any animosity, open animosity? I'm sure there had to be.
Very little. The Japanese were a disciplined people, and they respected authority. Wherever it came from, they respected it. So they respected us just like they did the authorities. We tried to teach them to be like we were, and that's when we started having problems with them.
Well, I think you gave me a picture of you standing. How long were you in Nagasaki first?
About 9 months.
And were there any? But there's a picture you showed me that I thought was pretty interesting of you standing with a samurai sword that probably stood about as tall as you are.
Well, that sword was taken from a Shinto shrine. It was a ceremonial sword that they used. Of course, we took all those things away from them. Took all their personal weapons, all their guns, shotguns, and pistols, and any weapon they had, swords, and that was taken out of a Shinto shrine, and it was ceremonial. It was not a combat sword.
Right. It'd be hard to use that in combat.
Oh,
but
yeah.
So you were stationed there. You had, I guess, a place where other soldiers were. Were you a lieutenant at that time?
I was, yes, I was. We were in a Mitsubishi shipbuilding office building.
Mm-hmm.
We had 3 of them, and as barracks and offices. And we were actually across the bay from the main center of Nagasaki, the center of town.
What were your duties, your orders? What were you performing on a day-to-day basis?
I was the battalion supply officer, and I also was a military government officer. And I went around a lot on patrols, and particularly went to the schools and interviewed the teachers to see if any of the teachers had what kind of background they had.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. I had to call in the regimental headquarters every night and let them know what I'd seen that day. But I did a lot of patrol duty out in the
Surrounding
countryside.
areas. Oh, I see. Were people holding up well? How did they react when they saw you? Well,
I'd take an interpreter with me, and they did very well. They did well. One thing that impressed me about the Japanese is they started working as soon as we got there. They needed something to work with. For instance, they thought the Jeep was about the most marvelous thing they'd ever seen. And they took our beer cans and made little miniature Jeeps out of them.
oh, did they?
And they'd give the soul for a 5-gallon dehydrated potato tin because they gave them a lot of raw material to work with.
Right.
And they were,
I guess raw materials were at a
Right.
premium,
yep, didn't have them at all.
and probably had not had them for a while as well. I want to go back just for a minute because there's a picture that I was intrigued by that you let me scan, and it'll be up on the website, of you and your brother sitting in front of a most unusual looking car. This has been in the mid-30s, 36, 37. And tell me about that car, because I've never seen one quite like it.
That was a 1921 Franklin touring car that my father had. I learned to drive on that car. It was for that day and time, it was a marvelous piece of equipment. It had an aluminum body, a wood chassis. It was air cooled. Had isinglass curtains you put up in the wintertime. And it had an air compressor on it, because in those days you were going to have flat tires. But it was kind of everybody in the community knew it, and all the boys in the mill called it Muley for some reason. I don't know why, but
Well, the grill is almost as tall as a.
oh gosh, yeah.
It's 4. You'll see it on the photograph. Those of you who visited, but it's the most unusual looking car, and apparently it's part of the family.
Well, funny thing about it, my dad had sold it one time. My mother said, "You go and get it back." He went and got it back.
Oh, he did.
He did.
It's probably a good move on his part, don't you think?
Yeah.
I suspect you wish you still had that car. But
Well, my older brother totaled it one day, as we would say now. He totaled it one day. It was like losing a member of the family.
yeah, I'm sure it was. Well, I don't want to end this interview without talking to you a little bit about your career. I know we spent some time here on your early life and growing up, but you told me that you retired at age 77.
I did.
And I know you worked for Danaher, you worked for Roush Industries, you worked for Burlington.
Out of Duke, I went to Burlington in 1950, and I worked for them for 24 years in Burlington, Greensboro, High Point, Mooresville, and was sent here in Gastonia to manage the Randall plant in 1969, and we parted the company in 1974, and then I went to work with Roush Industries for 5 years, and then went with Danaher Tool Group and worked with them 21 years.
Well, the intriguing thing to me was that you worked till you were 77, Of course, at your age, that may seem like a young man to you now, but what kept you going? Why did you keep? I mean, that's a long time to be in that business, because I'm sure it was a tough business to be in, especially in the latter years. You obviously have a strong work ethic.
Well, I did, and I enjoyed the work, and I was physically fit, felt good. Saw no reason to retire. Just keep going. And age 77, I said, about time to go.
Well, we're really glad that you agreed to come and speak with us. Tell us a little bit. I know there's so many more stories you could tell, and memories that you could share with us. But it has been a real pleasure. I really appreciate your agreeing to come and be interviewed. I know this is not something you do every day, but it's just been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
I've enjoyed the whole thing, Rob.
Well,
One thing about old folks, they like to talk about themselves.